Creek Indians. Regions. The Creek Indians lived in the central and southern part of Georgia. There were several tribes who lived under the Creek Indian name. One of these tribes was called the Muscogee tribe. The Creek Indians received their name because of their many villages were built by a creek. A creek is a small stream of water. Regions. The Creek Indians were located across 4 states: Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. Today, most of the Creek Nation lives in Oklahoma. Families. The men hunted deer while women gathered nuts, wild onions, and berries. They tended gardens full of corn, beans, and squash, and shared food with all. Corn was important food, and women ground it into meal and made sofkee and blue dumplings. Creek villages. A typical village was built around the council house and a large field used for sports. The houses had thatched roofs. Thatch is dry grass layered to make the walls and roofs. Creek villages. Depending on the wealth of the Creek family, a family may have had up to 4 buildings. Each building served a different purpose for the family. The walls of these dwellings were made from mud and straw. The roofs were made from cypress bark. Near each dwelling, the women and girls would plant a small garden. Outside the village, each member of the village participated in the farming of a much larger garden. Clothing. Women and girls made the clothing for the family. They used animal skins to make their clothing and bones, feathers, and beads to decorate their clothing. Different clothing was made for different occasions. Creek Indians had different clothing for special ceremonies, war, and everyday use. Clothing. In summer, the Creek Indians wore few clothes. Men wore deerskin breechcloths and women wore skirts. Clothing. During the winter months, the Creek Indians wore heavy clothes to protect them from the cold weather. Women wore long dresses with leggings underneath them. Here are some examples of their clothing. Accomplishments. The Creek Indians had to use what resources were available to them in the forest and around the creeks. The Creek Indians made tools from stone and wood. What do you think these items were used for by the Creek Indians? So you have your arrowhead, grinding stone, knife, and rolling pin. Remember how we were talking about the chocolate to be ground up? That's something that they would use to ground things up in. Accomplishments. The Creek Indians also had a language they used to communicate within the tribe. The Creek alphabet is made up of 20 letters. Art was also a big part of the Creek's culture. Pottery influenced the function of everyday life of the Creek Indians. Art was profoundly used in the construction of Creek pottery. So I hope you learned something about the Creek Native American tribe.